No point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought.
All right, welcome to our show today. Welcome back. We've got a guest who's so interesting. I had to have him back a second time. He's a healthcare executive, business developer, investor, mentor, author, coach, curator, educator, son, husband, father, brother, athlete, coach. Man, he's done everything. He's basically like Michelangelo. Graduated from the Citadel. He did 2 tours of tour with the ASIC and airborne. Thank you for your service. He's got his master's and doctorate in health administration from the Medical University of South Carolina. He spent 30 years in digital health innovation, entrepreneurship, business development. He's invested many projects. One of his most interesting ones, most recent one, is a privacy project, which you talked about last time in the show. So down in the show links below, you can see that previous interview. We talked about Validide. Maybe we'll hint on it today, but what I want to talk about today was his best-selling book here. It's really good. He's a biohacker focused on combining farm-to-table organics and just an all-around great guy, soccer player, triathlete, tennis enthusiast. And one of the coolest things that if you want to talk about is he's adopted 5 special needs kids. I mean, talk about a wonderful person, a wonderful human being. Welcome to the show today, Dr. Gordon Jones. How are you today?
Good. And you must remember it's we, as in Jennifer, my wife, and I.
There ain't no
me.
We've talked about her, but
it takes a we to do that.
Yeah, that's for sure. It takes probably a we to do most of your things, except even the triathlete, you need a coach or someone to spur you on those cold mornings and whatnot. So yeah.
Which was my wife.
I just had a great time talking to you about your privacy project. We share a lot of similar passions in that area, as we both know. But I'm going through your book again this past week. I'm like, oh my gosh. I mean, you kind of did this book as like an offhanded thing, but people need to realize it's like combining like 10 of my favorite books into one. And I can't go through the whole thing. It's so big today. It's called How to Create Yourself by Dr. Gordon Jones, a guy on our show today. And the content in here, I mean, we could spend a whole half hour just on one page. I mean, there's such good stuff in here. What caused you? I mean, this is a bunch of blog posts you combined and edited and polished up, right?
Yep. So I've been writing since forever.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was probably an early person on LinkedIn. So I would and they haven't really done a good job on their blog side of things, but I just started writing, posting on there, and after a while, you got so much content, you kind of say, hey, maybe we can put all this together in one place for people to be able to access it. So that's how the idea came.
The title's intriguing, How to Create Yourself.
Yeah.
Tell us more about that. Where'd that come from? What does that mean to the reader?
Yeah. So, and you'll read in the book, in the 90s, when I was really starting getting into an entrepreneurship, and I was actually really even reading a lot of this personal development stuff earlier, but that was when the internet was starting to come about, and I was doing my clinical research, my doctoral research on how healthcare can adopt the internet and internet-based technologies. And I was reading a book by Stephen Pollan, who talks about die broke. So basically build yourself up, become successful, make all the money you want to, but then also make sure you don't have any at the end of your life too. But in there, he talks about how we as individuals should, instead of working and being beholden to even an employer, it's a create yourself Inc. So turn yourself into an entity of which you focus on yourself to go down this path towards whatever you consider the definition of success is. And in there, so yourself Inc. was what he said. And then he has a sentence that says, hey, create yourself Inc. And because URLs or domains or web addresses are so prominent in regards to the internet, as a matter of fact, they're considered a digital asset in and of themselves. I said, man, create yourself. That sounds like something pretty cool. Maybe I'll go search and see if the website, the domain's available. And behold, and right in the middle of the internet boom, createyourself.com was still available. So I bought it then. I've owned it for like 30 years now or whatever. And I didn't really do a whole lot with it. But I knew I wanted to kind of continuously evolve myself around this idea of how to create yourself. And so I've had various versions of the website. And right now it's a community built on a community development app called Mighty Networks, but it's a mobile app that you can download and search for createyourself.com, and you'll be able to join our community there for free. But that's still how the name came about.
I noticed when I'm going through the book here, there's great chapters on, the spirit of it, the role of the universe in it, how to create your journey, strategies, prosperity. But the beginning of the book is it's about 3 times the size of all these tactics. And you talk about the why, right? There's the purposeful prosperity, stigma against wealth, decluttering your brain, create yourself vision. How come there's so much emphasis on the why?
Well, if you don't have purpose, if you don't know why you're here, if we don't know why we're here, then we can't create a purpose, can't define what our purpose is, and then we can't define our journey to create yourself because we don't know where it is we want to go. I'm trying to think of there's a good pun about that, but I can't pull it off the top of my head right now. But basically it's, if you don't know where you're going, then you'll get there. So, but that's the why. You have to have, have to have purpose.
I've got Simon Sinek's book on Start With Why. I watched his TED Talk twice. It's great. He's a great orator, of course, and it makes sense. You can't, first question they ask you at the ticket booth is, where do you want to go? So it's nice to have a destination in mind. But there's a lot of different nuances to what you said in the why section, Gordon. It's not just defining the why, but understanding it, right? It's like, well, I'll give you an example here when I was going through this. Okay. How did others do it? How do you define success? The Bible of prosperity. I'm sorry, the Bible on prosperity, because I know you're a faithful guy. Subconscious mind. There's a lot of different elements to this why. It's not just, hey, define your purpose, now go do it. You take a pretty deep dive into that. Is there any one of these things that stands out in your mind in terms of all these elements?
Well, you really have to want to do this, because it's not easy.
No.
It's a journey. And one big aspect of all this, and I talk about this in a recent post that I did on LinkedIn in regards to childhood development around privacy. So one of the big things that we do as children, as we're developing ourselves, is we don't know what it is we're doing, but we verbalize that with our friends. Or we might do an activity and we're subconsciously looking at how our friends respond to that. And all of this starts to help develop who we are and what our identity is. And all this is done subconsciously through, the gifts that God gave us to be able to consciously think or subconsciously think. And so if we take that just whole idea of how we learn and develop our identity as a kid into adulthood, now we have to really start thinking about how we do it. So we have to understand the mental behaviors that we generate off of different cues that we get from our environment. And so that's one of the things that we have to do, is make sure that we have an environment that is conducive to pursuing that of which we want to create. And so if we don't start thinking about even our environment and some of the things that we regularly think about because they're in front of us, and maybe start changing those things, then we can't really even get started on the journey. So definitely won't be able to define what your why or purpose is.
Okay, so you've done 18,000 things in your life. Is there a common thread amongst yours that establishes your why?
So I've let my mind generate the idea of a goal.
Mm-hmm.
So the goals aren't necessarily mapped together because those basically are things like, for example, when my wife and I were dating seriously, leading to the consideration of getting married, she's a marathoner. She's done 28 marathons, and then she was doing triathlons, and I am no runner. I was a soccer player and an ultimate frisbee player, but I'm not a marathoner. But she bought me a bike for Christmas about a year before we ultimately ended up getting married. And she said, "Well, if you don't ride this thing, then we probably aren't going to be getting married." So I had no ideas around running marathons and no desires to do a triathlon, but she got me into that. And so it was, okay, this is now a part of my journey. It's in my path. Now, how am I going to become fairly successful at it? Trust me, I completed marathons and I completed triathlons, but I can't say I placed. But it was really interesting and fun to go through, especially with my wife. So just things come to play. So for example, we're creating this, and this is technical, but we were creating this universal health coin cryptocurrency in 2017, 2018 to take this blockchain and cryptocurrency stuff into healthcare. And so I was learning about blockchain, and I saw Tim Draper sing this song that he kind of scripted out about blockchain at one of his conferences. And I said, dude, man, I can sing better than that. So I just sat down and wrote a song called Blockchain Movement, which is now on, it's published now. It's on iHeartRadio and Spotify and all the channels that you can go and see. And I'm not a songwriter. I just sat down and wrote one, and then hooked up with a friend of mine named Arthur Love, and we went and sang it and put some music to it and made it fun and published it. And so now I got a song out there. It's just things like that. And then when you're doing that, then you just have to make sure you do it well enough that it makes you proud, and that becomes a part of your Create Yourself journey.
Okay, so the individual goals are silos, right? That's fine. That makes sense, because we're not just so myopic that we only do one thing. Most people, at least, they want to have some kind of variety in their life. You more than most, but but when it comes to defining your why of your journey, I mean, is it to make the world a better place? Is it Gordon's relationship with his family? I mean, is there anything that connects all of those?
Well, certainly for me, it's the family. I mean, we didn't birth these kids, so we purposely adopted them. We wanted them to be our children. And so it's our responsibility to feed them, guide them, and help grow them into productive and giving members of society. And so, once we got married and started doing that, then yes, every single thing that I wanted to accomplish was then oriented to how will it benefit my kids. And then as we got more and more into the world of special needs, it was, okay, well, how can this benefit those who are challenged? So yeah, I mean, it all kind of ultimately ends up feeding into each other. And actually, at the end of the day, I wouldn't have been able to write this book if I didn't have all these crazy things that I did. So, and that's where God comes into play, right? So God has some purpose for our life.
Yep.
And even if we don't necessarily know what it is, we can still kind of generate one for ourselves.
Uh-huh.
But it's going to be along his path, whether we like it or not, because that's the way God designed the world. So,
right. Yeah. So if you don't mind my asking, I'm curious about this. So you guys, okay, let's go adopt a child, and you sought out a kid with special needs, or how did that happen? The first one.
Yeah. Well, so we're both in healthcare. My wife has her PhD in speech pathology, and already she's in pediatrics, so she already helps these kids. As a matter of fact, she designed a multidisciplinary model of combining occupational speech and physical therapy together in one location so that these kids can get this multiple type of care in conjunction with each other so that they help each other in order for the kid to actually advance in their rehab faster. But anyway, so we both have healthcare backgrounds. And of course, when you're in healthcare, you're not necessarily there to make money unless you're a physician, but because they're the ones who make the money. But the rest of us are there to, serve the patient. Of course, the physicians are there to serve the patient. But so we just had that mindset anyway. So when we started looking to adopt, so at first we weren't looking at international adoptions because we didn't necessarily want an infant. We didn't need an infant. That's not what we were trying to do, is to get an infant. So we weren't looking at just infants. Of course, actually our second child was an infant, but when you're looking at all this, most of the kids that are up for adoption have special needs. In the United States, they might have been abandoned or something like that. But at the end of the day, through their abandonment by their own family, they create mental issues. They grow up with these mental issues. And then when you're institutionalized for any period of time, the government doesn't know what they're doing. So they medicate you. And then God just worked crazy things into how we got each individual child. We're not necessarily looking through a book saying, "Oh, let's go check this one out." That's not even what we did.
It's not like you're picking out a puppy, huh? You just
well, they do that. I mean, they do that, but we didn't do that. We just kept meeting these people,
right,
who either were sponsoring or knew of or whatever a particular child, and then it just kind of worked out. For example, so our first two were from Georgia, from the Georgia, the state in the United States, not the country. And the first of our international children, Samuel, from China. We didn't have any intention to go international, but I have a degree in Chinese studies, but I'd never gone over there because China kept shutting down their borders or whatever they were doing every time I wanted to go over there. So Jennifer, for my 50th birthday, took me to a trip to China. And we spent some nice weeks there and had fun and all that, and came back. And then right when we came back, Augusta's got a pretty significant community of Chinese people plus adoptive parents of kids from China. And a lot of those kids go to see my wife as their therapist. And so she was talking to one of the mothers of one of these children a week after we got back while they were in therapy. And the mother said, "Oh, well, our missionary from China is coming and you need to come watch their presentation and learn what they're doing over there." And it was like the next Wednesday night. Well, as a part of the presentation, they talked about Samuel and he touched our hearts. And so okay, well, we're going to go to China and look at adopting some kids there too. So that's how that happened. So it's all, we weren't looking for any particular kids. And we weren't necessarily, we hadn't even planned on doing 5. So it just kind of happened.
Once you have 2, it's like, oh, okay, let's keep going. That's amazing. That's really amazing. Now, do they, are you, the kids reading the book? Are they?
Yep. So I have written a personal note to each one of them. Actually, my 12-year-old got the first one because he just started military boarding school.
Oh my.
And so he's at Riverside, in Gainesville, Georgia. But anyway, so he just started his military school career. And so I gave him the very first copy that I bought for myself because I didn't have any physical copies. So I gave him that copy, wrote him a nice note. And we talked about it on the trip over there. And so he has it now in at his school. And then I got some more. So I've given to each one of my kids. I still have to deliver my daughter. She's 26 and lives down in Florida. So she doesn't have her physical copy. She's got an electronic copy. So
Yeah.
But they all know that, you know, a big part of the reason why I put all this together was for them.
Right.
And I'm wide open for discussing things with them. And then whenever they're off and on their own, they can reference it as they need to.
Has they given you any feedback or said, hey, I use this today in my school or whatnot?
Well, it's only been a month. So, well, the 12-year-old, he probably hasn't even read a page yet, right?
Fair enough.
He's doing what he's doing at school. And I just gave my Samuel and Judah their copy just this week, so they haven't started yet.
Fair enough.
But they are telling their friends, "Hey, Daddy wrote a book."
That's right.
Yeah, but,
Dad's an author. Yeah.
But I can't say that we've been having our book club discussions about it yet. So, but
It's
they
not
already
easy.
know a lot of what's in it because that's what we do, right? As a matter of fact, the next to the last chapter is our Jones family principles, where you know it's on the wall. And it's what we believe and how we believe we should interact with each other as a family. And then the house rules, like if it's open, but it's supposed to be closed, hey, close it. If it's closed, but it's supposed to be open, hey, open it. If it's dirty and it's supposed to be clean, then clean it, you know, the rules. And then if down the last rule is if at the end, after all, if you attempted to try to do all this stuff and you can't, and you need help, then ask management.
Wow. That sounds wonderful.
Because we got to, you know, with their special situations, we have to make sure they can live independently because we don't necessarily want them living in our house for the next 35 years.
That's right. Yeah. It's a different side of that coin. So you have the rules and the principles. Are there many principles? Or there something you can summarize?
Hey, at the end of the day, it's respect for each other.
There you go.
I mean, that's really it because, you know, they fight and yell at each other and then they get us all riled up and we're fighting, yelling. So we can respect each other's at that level and including space. So don't go in your brother's room and steal his stuff. You know, don't make fun of them when parents aren't around, you know, all that kind of stuff. So it's not just respect your elders, but also respect your siblings. And that's pretty much that message because we're trying to keep a relatively non-disruptive home. It's really kind of hard with 4 boys in the house, but we don't want to turn into a dysfunctional family. That's the goal, is to not be a dysfunctional family. So we're doing pretty good in that life.
Right. Okay. Well, give me. I just love this topic because it fascinates me to adopt 5 special needs kids. What was the hardest thing about all that process? How many years did you go through all this, the adoption for all 5? And then what's been the hardest part of that?
Yep. So Jennifer and I decided before we got married that we would adopt. And then we got married Thanksgiving morning, 2007.
Nice.
To save money because now we didn't have to have a wedding and Thanksgiving. So we had it all at the same time. And then we started the classes. So you got to go through all these trainings and it takes about 9 months to kind of go through all that stuff. Before we were able to adopt or bring into our home Amber, who's our first child. She's now 20, getting ready to turn 27.
Okay.
So, but then from there, so she was in 08, 09.
Okay.
And then at the end of 09, we got Capers as an 8-month-old. So he was the infant.
Right.
That's a whole cool story in itself. His social worker she wasn't supposed to let us have him. And we weren't pursuing him.
Yeah.
But we knew who he was and some other foster parents that were taking care of him as an infant.
Okay.
But she was so mad at the system and what they were doing and that they were even denying us the opportunity to, that she just made sure it happened. So we were on our way. I like to go snow skiing,
Yeah.
but I haven't been in so very long. So we were taking Amber up to North Carolina to go teach her how to snow ski because she'd never done any of that. And we got a phone call saying, "Hey, we got this 8-month-old. Do you want them?" And we said, "Well, we'll be back on Monday." And this was like Thursday. And we got up there, skied one day, and said, let's go. So we just quit the whole ski trip and drove back to.
Wow.
And then it was probably 3 years till we got Samuel from China, because that's a long. I mean, that's a year-long process. Even after all the training, it's a year-long process. Yeah. And then the other thing cool about that adoption was. So he's got some special medical needs, and he'd been followed by a bunch of people around the world for years, but it was only really good for a medical family to adopt him. Understood. So we could make sure that we could take care of him. Okay. And so there were a lot of people around the world who were following Samuel's journey because of his special story.
Wow.
And so we started getting cash money in the mail to help pay, because it costs about $55,000 to go do that.
Yeah.
With all the expenses and everything. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, we basically only had to fund about 10%. I mean, all money just started flowing in from all over that helped pay for this thing.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, it was. I mean, there's so many stories that go along with all that.
Yeah, I'm sure.
But one interesting thing is, okay, after you adopt a child in China, then you have 18 months to use the same. They call it home study. The paperwork package. Mm-hmm. You can use that same paperwork package if you have adopted a kid within 18 months.
Okay.
So we said, okay, well, it's almost up. Let's just see if we can adopt another kid. Yeah. Well, and then we found out you can adopt two at the same time. So that one was, we adopted Judah and Randy at the same time, at different age. They are 5 years apart, but they came from the same orphanage.
Yeah, nice.
And so we went over there and brought two home with us on that trip. Yeah.
Amazing. Where are they from?
So they're all from South China.
South China. Okay.
Yeah.
So with all that,
right across from Taiwan.
Okay. With all that being said, number one, just amazing. Kudos to you for have such an open heart, open home for all those kids. What's been the biggest challenge for you guys in that journey?
Patience. So we ask God all the time.
Yeah, I bet.
Why? I mean, we are terrible parents. Why did you think that we could raise these kids, right? And I mean, it's not all the time that we think that, but there's times where the frustration level is like way up here, and we're like, God, we have got to be the worst parents. And
I don't think so.
But anyway, so that's the toughest, is just, I mean, the medical thing. I mean, with Samuel, we spent, I mean, it was probably, it still continues, but real intense, like going to Cincinnati's Children's. Then we followed our doctor to New York Presbyterian in New York City. And we finally got him recruited to MUSC in Charleston. So now it's short, but there's no more surgeries or anything like that. So it's just checkups. But that was, I mean, like, he got one surgery after one surgery, paralyzed for like 4 months from the hip down. So he was in a wheelchair, and finally it dissipated.
Nice.
Because it wasn't permanent. But anyway, and that stuff we can deal with, because we deal with that kind of stuff being in healthcare all the time.
Right.
So it's just it's the extra thing on top of just being regular boys.
Yeah. Right.
You know, because Judah, so he's got cerebral palsy and he's deaf.
Wow.
Which means he has a really hard time defending himself.
Yep.
And then his other brothers are all physically normal, so they can like push him over with a pinner. So we got to tell you, don't touch him. Just don't touch him.
Yeah.
But of course they're boys, so they're acting like they normally do, and he gets
Right.
touched and he gets knocked down or something like not hit, but just knocked down. But anyway, so we got to deal with all that stuff.
I'm just so impressed. It sounds like it'd be a great Hallmark movie or something here, Gordon. I don't know. I know you're not into the, showing off and all
We
that stuff. I
definitely don't
appreciate
want to
that.
have a reality TV show going on in that.
No, I didn't say reality TV. No, I don't want to do
Yeah.
that. We're way above that. The book, though, that relates to all this stuff is Dr. Gordon Jones' book, How to Create Yourself. I get the reflection off this. There we go. How to Create Yourself. It's an amazing, amazing book that has just tons of wisdom from a lot of different perspectives and ideas over the years with your wide background and whatnot. So I highly recommend it. Any closing ideas or anything you can offer the audience today?
Well, I do want to say that through the book, you'll also be exposed to a lot of other people, because I talk about their books or their journeys, not in depth, but good snippets.
Yeah.
My buddy Gary Ryan Blair, who created the 100 Days Challenge, he's kind of a mentor for me. He writes the foreword.
Nice.
And then Tom Butler Bowden, he's the author of the 50 success books, 50 best success books in the world, and the 50 best. I mean, he's got a series of the 50 best.
Wow.
And he summarizes the 50 best in all of those different genres. So like you could get his 50 best and then have read 50 books about personal development, for example,
right.
or about spirituality. So I definitely recommend those two authors out of the mix. But we talk about Napoleon Hill and I mean, everybody.
Right.
So, and the Bible. We talk about the Bible.
Good book. Yeah. Good one.
Yeah. That's the foundation. We can do all this other stuff, but we got to have a foundation to
That's right. So all wisdom comes from that.
But yeah, so I appreciate it, man.
You bet.
It's always fun to have a good chat with you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for being on the show. I appreciate it, folks. Look down below. You see some show notes there. Link to the previous interview with this company, Validide, for privacy. Can't stress that enough. But the book, get this book. It's really good. How to Create Yourself by Dr. Gordon Jones.
My wife wants me to do the audible version.
Yes. I just contracted with a studio in Asheville on that.
Okay.
Talk offline. I'll give you the name of the person.
Okay.
Great studio for that. Yeah.
Okay.
Try about. Anyway,
Cool.
Thanks for being on the show today. Appreciate it. This is your host, Doug Crow, with the Author Brand Show. Be sure to click below and subscribe for some free goodies as well. We'll see you until next time.